Hello anglers, welcome back to a very special Albion Online Fishing video. Today, I'm going to teach you how to catch only puremists. Through years of research and gameplay, I finally found a way to guarantee you catch only puremists. We'll go over the discovery, the science behind how it works, how to do it, the pros and cons of this method, and at the end I'd love to hear your feedback on this method. So let's go into part 1, discovery. To do this, I think I need to give you a little bit of background, and I'll do that by telling a story. Years ago, when I wasn't an elder angler, I was catching a deadwater eel in Merkwell. I could tell it was a T7 eel because the fish would not budge during the minigame. Well, as I was reeling in, I misclicked, and on accident, I dropped the fish. No worries, I thought. I'll just cast on the same fish. No harm, no foul. So I did, but this time, it was only a spotted trout. How can that be? I thought. I know I had a deadwater eel. Where did it go? This seemingly insignificant moment planted the seed in my mind that fishing isn't predetermined, but rather RNG based. This idea sat with me for years until recently I put my hypothesis to the test. The idea being I could manipulate the fish I cast on and manipulate it to be a puremist by casting on it repeatedly until I feel a strong fight. Which brings us to part 2. How do you catch only puremists? Like I just was speaking about, I set out a few weeks ago to test the hypothesis. I was armed with over 100 tier 1 bait, ready to take on the challenge. Once I found a TA road, I began fishing. I then began spamming the same fish that I could see over and over again, watching the minigame fish and seeing how it felt when I clicked. By casting over 70 times on one fish, I was able to turn it into a puremist. I then repeated this process over and over again on all the fishing pools and any fish that I could see in the water. In 1 hour of fishing, I was able to catch 54 puremists, and it was the only thing that I was catching. Now we can get into part 3, which is the science behind this. This is still simple speculation and a hypothesis, but I believe this works because the fish that gets caught or put on the end of the line is randomly generated at the time the bobber goes down. So, by increasing the volume of casts I do in 1 hour, I can increase my odds of catching a puremist, doing 500 casts in an hour versus 200. Which brings us to part 4, the feasibility. Right? Is this method actually feasible for fishing? I don't think it is, at least not solo. I do believe that if you have 5 to 10 fishermen all going out and fishing using this method, it could be useful. You can then maximize how many casts each of you is making and take advantage of just the sheer volume of casts, doing 2,500 or 5,000 casts an hour, so everyone is consistently only pulling out puremists. You could also couple this method with regular fishing, so 30 minutes of regular fishing, and if you don't get any puremists, use this method for the next 30 minutes to guarantee puremists and guarantee profit. Which takes us into part 5, pros and cons. So the pros, it's guaranteed money. You can ensure you can make at least 1 mil by only catching puremists. It's guaranteed puremists, so if you're looking to cook roasted snapper, you can, and that's the only thing that you care about, this method works. Another pro is, if blessed with good RNG, you could easily catch, maybe not easily, but you could catch over 100 in an hour if you're really blessed with good RNG. And it also, the last pro that I could think of is that it's a great use of the roads of Avalon limited water. There's a finite amount of water you can fish there, and so it's very easy to overfish, especially if you have 2 fishermen at the same time. But using this method, you can fish the same pond for an hour, because the fish will just keep respawning as you catch one puremist, the next pool will respawn. So you can really get the most bang out of your buck using just one pond in the road. The cons, it requires a ton of patience. You're going to be standing there spamming the same fish hundreds possibly of times before you finally get that puremist. You lose out on all the other fish that you would be catching. So instead of catching other snapper, sturgeon, dango mouth catfish, you're not catching those, you're only catching pyramids. So you don't get to chop seaweed, or you don't get the seaweed, you don't get to chop fish from the other fish. So that's a con. It hurts your finger really bad because you're casting hundreds and hundreds of times, and you have to click through the actual casting. So it really hurts your finger. It will put a strain on your finger if you try to use this method. You may be getting it may be less profitable actually, if you do have bad RNG. If it takes you 200 times to catch one puremist and it takes you 10 minutes, then that's not as good as, if you're just doing the regular fishing. And this method really isn't very useful for non-T8 fishermen because less yield and less fame per hour. A T7 you could get 2 or 3, whereas if you're tier 8 you can catch 4, you're catching 3 or 4. And if you're tier 7, you should be trying to level up. And so doing this method, you're missing out on that fame. You're not filling books, you're not making as much money. So it's kind of a con there. Which leads me into the takeaways. So this new method of fishing could be great in conjunction with regular fishing and or multiple fishermen. It isn't the most ideal method, but it could be useful for some. There are many cons with this method, and I personally wouldn't recommend it unless you're specifically targeting puremists for a given reason. One thing I didn't mention, but I wanted to know, is this set can be applied to all other T7 fish, but the only fish you can guarantee catch would be Kraken and puremists, because Kraken can only be caught in tier 7 saltwater zones, so they have to be there. Puremists are only found in the roads. All other T7 fish can be caught in multiple zones, so you can't guarantee dead water eel, unfortunately. You can increase your chances by going to the forest, but you won't guarantee. You can still catch clams and other T7 fish, rare fish. So that leads us to finally the feedback. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this in the comments below. I talked to Beast and Merloka, and they thought this was like an exploit. Personally, I didn't think it is. I think it's just a better understanding of fishing and like understanding fishing on an entirely new level. What do you guys think? Do you think SBI should change this? Can they, without completely revamping how fishing works on the back end, basically having to change the RNG process for fishing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, happy fishing.